there's no erasure in my brain where I want to completely get rid of that pain,
Hmm.
because so much of that pain led me to these different pathways of into like the arms of friends, or
Hmm.
into the fog of Iceland again, or the page of my journal.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Love, Loss, and Hallucinations. This one coming to you live from the Pink Garter Theater in Jackson, Wyoming. This is a first for us, so fingers crossed all of this technology works and this actually comes alive as it should. Today, an awesome guest. I'm so glad to have him on the show. His name is Andrew Munz. Andrew is a writer, comedian, and actor who is trained at Second City in Chicago, as well as the Annoyance Theater and IO Theater, also in Chicago, and has also performed a one-man play in New York City. Raised in Jackson, Wyoming, he currently runs the Tumbleweed Creative Arts, which includes managing the historic Pink Garter Theater in downtown Jackson. This man has stories, so let's get into it. Andrew, welcome to the podcast.
Scott, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be part of this.
I'm super excited to have you here. I've known Andrew for at least a decade.
Yeah.
Back when you were a young lad, and as then I just knew you as a writer, and have sort of watched you come into all these different roles over the years. So excited to talk to you about how some of that evolved and happened and went down really for you. But I'm going to give you, like, I've never done this before either. I'm going to give you a little dealer's choice.
Ooh, great.
Yeah. Would you like to start with love, loss, or hallucinations?
Let's dive into hallucination.
Oh, I like that. Going
Yeah.
right into the juice stuff,
Yeah.
juicy stuff. Well, it's all juicy, but all right. Well, keeping in mind that hallucinations might have something to do with plant medicine,
Mhm.
might have something to do with dreams, or
Mhm.
misperception of reality, or like you thought, like owning a theater was going to be one thing, and it just turned out something completely different. Um, I'm curious, what specific memory comes to mind first when you think about hallucinations?
Uh, I think a lot about um, just the kind of delirium that happens when you create very ambitious art.
Hmm.
And as somebody who is a storyteller, I am a like a writer, a director. I've written and produced my own plays, as you know, and um, there is a strange sense of autopilot that happens when you really dive into something that you're very passionate about,
Hmm.
and really understand that you are the only person that can really deliver it to the finish line. And I tend to find myself in these positions of overworking myself. I reach burnout, I push through, and I'm just dancing in the ashes at that point. Um, because for me, really diving into my own art and these projects that I dream up is how I cope with things. It's how
Hmm.
I um, uh, satisfy my own desires and uh, make friends in those environments as well. Um, I think by diving into your own passion in such an intense way
Mhm.
is really how you not only discover a bit more about who you are, but you also show who you are to so many other people. And a lot of the time, those people are in the audience. Sometimes they are backstage with you and performing with you. Sometimes they are, donors who are sitting on the other side of a coffee table, and you are expressing what these are, and they start to understand, why these projects are important, not just to me as an artist, but also to the community that we're building them in.
To humanity, really.
Very much.
Yeah.
Art is so important, um, and so maybe it's a bit of a cop out to think about that as a hallucination in some respect. But honestly, once a show that we, from auditions through rehearsals to the performances themselves, and then it's over, people always ask, like, "Oh gosh, are you recovered? Like, have you recovered? Are you like good now?" And I barely remember them
Oh,
um,
wow.
because I'm so invested in the now
Mhm.
that and what's next, that looking back ends up being a very different task.
Well,
And
plus I would also imagine that in most of these instances, even if it's, where you're weaving in your own experiences and there's some sort of like autobiographical stuff to it, you're still creating like a different new reality, right?
yeah,
And learning about yourself, learning about people, learning about the world through
mhm,
these new realities that you're creating. Does that sound accurate?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, I think every art form is a form of education.
Hmm.
And whether you're witnessing it, experiencing it, listening to it, or creating it
Hmm.
yourself, there is so much to be learned about us as humans, our own emotions, the things that really catalyze those sparks
Mm.
within us. And it could be a show that you binge on Netflix because you're just so into it, or it's a musician or a band that you just absorb their entire uh, you know uh, uh, music archive, right? And learn every lyric.
Yeah.
There are books that you completely dive into, or book series that are each like 600 pages, and you just blow through them because you found something that speaks to your own kind of internal chemistry,
Right.
and really honors a bit of that, the those interests and those passions that you may not know you've had. And I think art certainly awakens those things in many ways, um, and there are other ways to awaken those thoughts and feelings as well. I think art is just one that
Yeah.
is pretty accessible to anybody regardless of their age.
I totally agree. I've had that experience and crossed many art forms myself.
Mhm.
And I'm just wondering for you, like, can you think of an example or a story or something you've put on where, where it was like this huge sort of revelation for yourself about you as well as the greater, community or humans in general?
Yeah. I You may know this about me, just because we're friends, but I have a weird obsession and love for Iceland.
Mm,
And
yes.
um, and as somebody who grew up in Wyoming, which does very much feel like this isolated, sparsely populated space.
Hmm.
Even though Jackson Hole is elevated and put in advertisements and really advertised to the world as a very popular place for so many, and we do have millions of tourists who come through. Um, this idea of growing up here and also living here year round, a lot of that kind of washes around you.
Hmm.
And
And it's a very, I mean, it's a big town in that the touristy economy thing, but it's a small town. There's only like population 10,000, I think, or permanent residents. And so finding someone who is raised here um, is like a needle in a haystack, really.
a bit.
Yeah.
A lot of us leave.
Yeah.
We're in pursuit of other
As you did.
opportunities. I have, yes.
Yeah.
Um, and we lose our housing or whatever it is. There's all these reasons why people leave, and then
Hmm.
there's all these reasons why people like me stay. Iceland was a place that I found that was really similar to
Mm.
Wyoming in that it was also somewhat isolated. It was a place where large towns are 3 hours away from each other. Yes, they have the ocean, but they also have these like really vast prairies of no trees,
Hmm.
and treeless buttes and lots of shrubbery, which we have as well. And that's something that I really saw a lot of similarity in. And um, as I was getting my first taste of Iceland with my first trip, which was in 2012, I just found something that really made sense to me, and it was a very weird, ethereal feeling that I don't really know how to describe
Mm.
fully. And I kept returning, and I kept going back, and I ended up.
Do you have a remembrance of like the first time you felt it? Like where were you? Like what was going on when that feeling came over
It
you?
was the first day,
First day.
and I landed that morning at like 6 or 5:30 in the morning or something.
You're already loopy.
Totally, and there was a sunrise, and it was in
Mm,
September,
mm,
and that sunrise was so vibrant and so intense, and I'd just never seen the sky or
mm,
colors like that before in my life, and it was the first time I was ever traveling somewhere alone,
mm.
without any destination, without the fact that I was, traveling with friends or meeting friends there. I was going blind,
Yeah.
And I think that paired with this beautiful nature that is, all surrounding in Iceland, um, that was very much the first time that I really understood why people fall in love with my hometown here in Jackson.
Ah.
And it was a really interesting parallel because when you grow up in a town, whether you have, the intense Teton range or not, you're kind of bummed out when you're hometown. It's boring, it's lame, and I never really understood why so many people were coming all the time. I
Mm.
knew we had Grand Teton National Park, I knew we had Yellowstone, but the rest always felt somewhat boring to me. Um, and as I got older, I started to understand the tourism industry, why people were coming. Um, but and I was holding a lot against those people in many ways because I felt like they were ruining my town, even though I was, not wanting to stay anyway.
Those
So
damn Turons.
sure, of course, and yeah, and then when I went to Iceland, I realized that I was a tourist myself, right?
Mm.
And yet, this was also a place where so many millions of tourists come to visit as well.
Mhm.
And walking through Reykjavik in the capital, I learned that I actually had a lot of these skills of like maneuvering around tourists who were walking slow. Like I had weird kind of tourism smarts
Yeah.
in a weird way.
Yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah.
knew not to like be a bother, not to ask too much, do my own research, try to pronounce things properly as best as I could, and I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to like not be seen as this, burden on this community. Um, but in truth, like when I opened myself up to this incredible country and its history, the people, the communities, I felt my chemistry change
Mm.
completely. And
Hmm.
I ended up moving there in 2014 and I became a whale watching guide. In 2015, I did this like workaway thing and I ended up getting hired as a chef and a baker in this like small hotel in 9 hours from
Wow.
Reykjavik. It was so remote
Wow.
and it was a very difficult time. And you know, Iceland had a lot of success for me, and it also brought out a lot of darkness.
Mm.
And because winter is rough, whether it's in
You've been there
Wyoming,
through the winter.
I was there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. Very different than when it's light 24/7. Let's just go dark.
Totally.
It's like
Um,
its own dark retreat. Yeah.
yes, and
Yeah.
like, and then there would be power outages and stuff, and it's just like dark, dark, and and yet people survive it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They cope and they adapt, and it was a good lesson for me in adaptation
Mm.
in the face of struggles.
Mm.
And during COVID in 2020, when the world was shutting down, because of my work that I'd already done in Iceland, I actually was able to achieve like, residency
Oh, wow.
and had like a bank account and everything. And I learned that Iceland was like opening their doors basically for 2 weeks for all Icelandic citizens and residents to like come back to Iceland. And I went for it.
You jumped.
Yes. So
Wow.
in June 2020, I went back to Iceland and I was there when the entire country was shut down. And
Wow.
it was really special. It was really
Mm.
beautiful. And
Like how so? Like what again, like what was it about? I mean, at first I just want to reflect that, it sounds like that first sunset like was just this sense of awe that struck you to your
mhm,
core that
yeah.
you're like, holy cow.
Mhm.
This place is incredible and gave you the reflection of, oh, maybe that's what people feel in Jackson, that sort of thing.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, so now you're there. Were you there for all of COVID, or just part of it, or most of it? And
I was
I'm
there
just
for about I want to say like 6 or 7 months.
mm, yeah.
Um,
And
and
yeah, and how does that like inform
yeah,
who you are now and how you see people?
I was able to focus a lot on my writing, which was
Mm,
really nice.
mhm,
And I was able to kind of step away from some of the chaos that,
mm,
Jackson was experiencing because a lot of people ended up moving to small communities around the West from larger cities, and the fabric of the community was changing a bit, and I was getting a sense of that from a distance. In Iceland, it was different because they really just closed down their borders, and they didn't have a big tourism population that summer, obviously,
right.
and
And you,
so
you
it
can't
was
really get there if
right.
yeah.
But what was really special was that I was able to really spend a lot of time with the locals as they were rediscovering their country,
Oh, wow.
because they were taking their kids across the around the ring road,
Hmm.
going to all of these very popular tourist destinations, like on par with Old Faithful and Yellowstone, and feeling like they were rediscovering their own country and sharing these really beautiful landmarks
Mm.
that during tourist season feel kind of inaccessible and overrun, um, with their children, and showing this kind of next generation like the beauty of this place that they live in. And witnessing that was so amazing.
Mm.
And I would travel with other Icelandic people, and we would go, along the south coast, which is very tourist heavy, um, and there would just be 20 people at some of these like massive waterfalls and
Wow.
spaces, and they were all speaking Icelandic and recognizing each other and saying hey, and um it was so special. And um and I got to spend some time in the north with my friend Stefan Eli, who has spent a lot of time in Guatemala and
Mm.
has actually researched a lot of plant medicine,
Okay.
um and it was a really cool experience to be with him and actually um, do a ceremony with him.
Okay.
And it was during that time in Iceland where I was able to um, take my first, experience in that level of, you know, hallucinations.
Yeah. So the ceremonial intentional use of some
Very
sort of
much.
plant medicine.
Yeah.
Um, well, since you brought it up, I'm curious, like what kind of medicine were you using, and was there anything, specific you were kind of wanting to dive into with that journey?
Um, I didn't have any expectation, really. I knew that I trusted my friends, and we were actually able to go, you know, pick these mushrooms ourselves.
Oh, wow.
And
So Icelandic mushrooms.
that's right. And
That's awesome.
so it was like directly from the earth,
Yeah.
and we dried them and made like a tea
Mm,
and just kind of hung out at our friend Diana's house. And um, and it was really beautiful because we are all artists,
mm,
and like the few of us that were involved with that, we're all artists, and kind of um, it was helpful for me too because and we'll certainly dive into some of the loss, because this was very within a year of me having a very intense tragedy in my life. And being around people I trusted, being in a safe environment, and trying something very different and very natural was really special.
yeah.
And um, and it really helped me also connect a bit more with the communities that that I've been meeting in Iceland, and
Hmm.
also understand a bit more of what is the Icelandic kind of mentality? What is um, uh, this culture that I'm so attracted to that
Hmm.
feels so reminiscent of home and
And what would you say that is?
pioneership. Um,
Pioneership.
uh, Iceland was settled, in the year 874, and by Norwegian settlers, and um, and it was very much this kind of manifest destiny of their own. But there was no indigenous population in this place.
Hmm.
They truly arrived, and there may have been a few Christian monks that didn't last. But other than that, the Vikings kind of took over this land and really built something out of nothing. And I thought about that, how it relates to the West, and this concept of if you want something and it's not there, you build it.
Hmm.
And um, and you can go seek it. You can go find it elsewhere where it has already been built. Um, but it really helped me understand who I was, why I was so passionate about creating work, and why I was a kind of self-proclaimed artist in a way. Um, because I think I was raised in a space that didn't have a ton of opportunities and didn't have a lot of um, uh, spaces where I could really, celebrate my art. I found it, in my youth, um, but it made me realize that I want to keep building and I want to keep being a bit of a pioneer myself
Hmm.
and create opportunities for other people. And it was through so many of these kind of strange tendrils that came together, um, that I started to understand that and to
Mm.
figure out who I was and what I wanted.
Wow. Well, and we'll definitely, as you know, you mentioned the loss, and we'll loop back to that certainly. But I do want to just touch on, like, just as you're saying, you know, that pioneer ethos that you really tapped into in Iceland, like, just from knowing you and what you're up to, you know, you've been doing that on multiple planes, from what I've witnessed, whether it's, you know, writing books about the West, as a gay man,
Mhm.
or being a gay man in a small town in the West.
Mhm.
Also, very like, you got to blaze your own path, right?
Yeah.
And then this theater and Tumbleweed Creative. It's certainly it's a monumental, I would say, passion and task you've taken on here, and you know, to make this creative center that's, you know, for the community, but also for, you know, people coming through, um, in a small town that, you know, doesn't have a huge base to support it.
Right.
um, but it, I guess just getting back to that, like, it sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that, you know, that experience in Iceland helped you, like, get the inspiration to, like, take this on.
Very much. And that's why our first like big show that we did once Tumbleweed Creative Arts was established, was a show called Saga, which was about the settlement of Iceland. And
And everyone's like, "What?"
exactly. Um, yeah, it was very strange to like throw that in cowboy country and be like, we're doing a Viking, historic musical that all the songs are in Old Norse. And but that was a big part of why, I do see these as all correlating. I
Mhm.
do see my identity, my mission, my own lofty ambitions, and these like strange kind of like connections to history or connections to another country or whatever it
Mhm.
is. I see all of that being a part of a grander narrative that ultimately is a book that only I can write.
Right.
And um,
But it's a book only you can write, and yet there's still, even within that, there's, like, these lessons and connections
yeah,
that other people can learn from.
absolutely.
Right.
And I think
As much
authentic,
most art is.
right,
Yeah.
like authentic art
Yeah.
is so universal,
Mhm.
even if it's very specific. Sometimes when it's very specific, that actually allows more people to really identify, because when you really define something and really define a story or a part of your life or something that you've experienced, people and you talk about that authentically, people will find something in their own lives that they can relate to in that. So it doesn't always have to be general.
Mhm.
Um, I think there's a grander power in the specific.
Well, absolutely agree with what you're saying there, and, I'm just curious, like, since we've touched on it, like, tell me a little more about, like, Tumbleweed Creative, where the name came from,
Mhm.
the whole background there,
Yeah.
and what you're wanting to accomplish with it.
Tumbleweeds are often seen in the West as, kind of this, like, bumbling, funny symbol of just emptiness, right? Um, that, it's usually, like, some sort of comedic thing,
Mhm.
of, like, an empty ghost town where, like, the tumbleweed just kind of passes through. And growing up in Wyoming, I was very familiar with a lot of, like, old cowboy songs and country music and things like that, and Tumbling Tumbleweeds was always one of my favorites.
Right.
Um, and then I was in at the Center for the Arts here in Jackson in November of 2014, and David Sedaris came to town, to do, a speaking event, reading, and also, like, book signing. And a friend of mine had gotten her book signed and had told David Sedaris that she went to the University of Wyoming, like so many of us did. And he goes, "Oh, I got a really good joke for you. How are fags like tumbleweeds? They blow and blow and blow until they get hung up on a fence in Wyoming."
Oy.
And now, those who are not familiar with gay history in Wyoming, uh, may not know about Matthew Shepard, who in October 1998 was a University of Wyoming student who was uh, beaten and pistol whipped, tied to a fence, and left for dead. And he was a young gay man who just had his life cut short by
Hmm.
some bigots.
Yep.
Um, and Wyoming has done a lot of work in both accepting the truth of what happened in terms of it being a hate crime
Hmm.
and also trying to mask it with this like drug deal gone wrong narrative,
Mm.
which has been debunked, but people still share it. And as a 11-year-old, young, questioning, but confused gay man
Mm.
up here in Jackson, to know that this thing happened, this terrible event happened 7 hours away in Laramie, um, and this young man was killed for being something that a lot of people were already calling me or like kind of making fun of me for that I
Hmm.
didn't really understand about myself.
Oh, wow.
Um, and learning at that time that you could get killed for it was really scary for me. And I dove into the closet deeply.
Mm.
And I didn't come out really fully up until 2016. And so like 9 years ago, where I really like elevated myself and like enunciated my voice in many ways
Hmm.
about my own identity, what I believe, who I am, and what I stand for. And um, I was always very afraid to do that, even in Jackson, which is often seen as this blue dot in a red state, but people forget that it's
It
still a red state.
it's still a red state, and it's just like barely blue
Yeah,
often.
yeah.
So yeah.
And and um, in September 2019, this tragedy that I feel like we're just foreshadowing now,
Yeah.
but we'll get to it.
Yeah.
Happened, and I ended up going to New York a couple months later to be a part of a Wyoming artist showcase that was hosted by my friend Aaron Roy.
Hmm.
It was called Destiny Manifests, and it was a opportunity for Wyoming artists to kind of share a bit of what they do in a very small space in Chelsea, in Manhattan, and um, when I had this tragedy happen in my life. Aaron had called me or sent me an email and was like, "Are you sure you don't really have to come anymore?"
Hmm.
And I said, "No, I'm coming." And she goes, what are you doing?" And I said, "I don't really know, but
Wow.
I will put something together."
Uh,
And so I started putting together a show called Tumbleweed, Dispatches from the Inequality State. And I wanted to write down my journey from being an afraid, often self-hating young gay man growing up in this town to my advocacy
hmm.
and my my voice that I was now sharing in my community to help other people understand that people like me have always been around, and we're just we haven't always had this opportunity to step forward in a safe environment,
Yeah.
and trying to help other people find that voice for themselves as well. And so this show was a discovery and a bit of a untangling of what is a tumbleweed,
Mm.
thinking about this joke. And I learned that tumbleweeds are, seen as these symbols of desolation, but they're actually cultivators. And they detach themselves from their roots when they mature. And they're brittle because they distribute seeds
Mm.
and they let the wind take them and they bounce across these high prairies and those seeds grow into other tumbleweeds. And so a tumbleweed's purpose is for the survival of other tumbleweeds. And so I started reworking that joke a bit, and I said, how are fags like tumbleweeds? They exist for each other and they
Mm.
exist to ensure the survival of each other.
Yeah.
um, and
Well, and I would extend that for what you're doing now to even the arts and
yeah.
anyone who is needing to express themselves.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
idea of cultivation
Yeah.
was a big part of the past couple of years since I discovered that parallel with
Mm.
tumbleweeds,
It's a beautiful
and
parallel.
um, and when I had started thinking about taking over this incredible space and starting a nonprofit in this community, it was a big question as to what it was I going to name this thing. And I had some initial board members that were pitching ideas, um, and uh, and should it be called like the Munz Theater Company, or all this kind of stuff. And I knew I wanted to create something that went beyond me,
Hmm.
that was more than just a benefit for myself, um, but an opportunity for others to also share their voices. And so, of course, the tumbleweed idea kind of came back around, and this idea of you know tumbleweeds not just being a representation of what it means to be like queer in Wyoming, but what it means to be somebody who helps share the voices and encourages the survival of others.
Yeah.
And um, and so, as an artist, and that being such a big part of my identity, I wanted Tumbleweed Creative Arts to be a space where I could help elevate other voices and bring people into this space to create, to share, to learn, to be brave, to try something brand new.
Yeah.
And every show that we've done now since we opened our doors in 2023, um, we've always had brand new people in the fold, um, and they're all local and they all live
Mm.
here, and that has been such a rewarding experience to know
Yeah.
that we are creating opportunity and creating space for other people to share their stories and perspectives, and also build community in this historic space.
Yeah. And I can just see that, like the rewardingness of it. I
Yeah,
just see it on your face right now. It's
totally.
really cool.
Yeah,
Um, well, and you mentioned story, and we've kind of alluded to this a couple times, but I feel like it's also woven its way through much of your story, and where you're coming from. And this is this loss that, very intense loss that you experienced in 2019,
yeah,
where your father and, well, I guess you can tell it
yeah.
because it's your story.
I lost my dad and my stepmom to a murder suicide, that occurred in town, and um, it was very intense, unexpected in some respect, somewhat not unexpected in
Mhm.
other ways.
Mhm.
Every family is different, and every dynamic is different. But it was a very intense thing to happen, right?
Yeah.
In a small town, especially where my last name, Munz, is not a very common name. And
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 you're known
so
in town.
very much, yes,
Yeah.
I've spent a lot of time and like most of my life putting myself on stage, putting myself in front of
Mhm.
people, and thinking about that idea of authentic art. How do I share who I am and what I do? Um, and for something like this to happen, um, was very intense and
Yeah.
very, uh, it really, you know, changed me in many ways.
Mhm.
But also in very positive ways also.
Interesting.
There's, I think for those people who experience tragedy in such a violent way, and especially when you can't really chalk it up to something like, oh, it was icy roads, they both perished in an accident. And
Mhm.
it was like, nope, there was a decision that was made by my father, and you know, a trigger that was pulled a few times,
Yeah.
um, and they he he ended that story. He really put a period down on um, on a lot of beauty, a lot of opportunity, a lot
Mhm.
of healing that could have happened.
Yeah.
And it was, it still is something that I look back on and see as a very uh, important part of my narrative, um, and yet not something that I feel the need to keep rereading or flipping back to, right?
Right.
Um, there's no erasure in my brain where I want to completely get rid of that pain,
Mhm.
because so much of that pain led me to these different pathways of into like the arms of friends, or
Mhm.
into the fog of Iceland again, or the page of my journal.
Yeah.
And um
Is there a way that you have become, would you say, comfortable with that pain?
um um I don't know if it's ever comfortable. I feel it's a bit of it's like a tolerance in some
Mm,
respect.
mhm,
A tolerance and a weird, um, like recognition of it. But in recognizing the potential value that it has contributed
mm,
to my life, but also um, the sadness that it also ignited in many ways. And thinking about that time, being back in Iceland with my friends and, with the plant medicine, that was a journey that I kind of went on in that space as well,
yeah.
of understanding that pain and understanding who I was.
The
And
plant medicine helped you understand,
yeah,
like, his pain or
mine,
your pain?
mine.
Yeah.
Yes. And it helped me understand that I couldn't understand his pain fully,
Mm,
right? My
yeah.
father's pain. I couldn't justify what he had done, nor could I make excuses for it, um, or, uh, you know, hate him for it.
Mm,
Um, it was a terrible thing that he did. And, he took two members of our family out of our lives that day.
yeah.
Um, and left the rest of us to pick up the pieces. And we're not a very big family. And it's a family
Yeah, it's
of,
your brother and your mother at this point.
and my two older sisters.
2 older sisters.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so my family is a family of immigrants. And both my dad and my mom and my two older sisters moved to the United States just a year before I was born.
Mm,
And um, the pursuit of the American dream was always a big part of my dad's
hmm,
narrative.
yeah.
And what he was trying to do was be a provider, um, and try to earn enough to be a sustainable American, right? And yet in Jackson Hole, that finish line is very obscure.
Hmm,
And he was trying to keep up with the Joneses, but the Joneses owned planes. And
mm,
um, and it became something that really consumed him. And
mm,
so while the American dream certainly powered so much of his own ambitions and his own drive, it also ended up being the thing that led to his demise and
mm.
the end of his legacy.
Wow.
Um, and yeah, my two older sisters still live nearby, in Driggs, Idaho, and also near Riverton, Wyoming. Um, and then I have my younger stepbrother, and it was his mom that
Mm,
my dad, you know, took out of this world.
yeah.
And so, um, my stepbrother and I have had a lot of incredible conversations, and we've both had to process this very differently, you
I
know.
imagine.
Um, and
Yeah, grief is, and especially in this situation, very different for every
totally.
person, of course.
Um, and but what I find really incredible about my family, and whether it's my stepbrother, my mom, or my sisters, um, is that we have a strong sense of self healing that we've all had to endure
Mhm.
over the years. It's all been different. It's all been very um, unique to each person in what they've had to um, process, deal with, whether they were moving to the United States or somebody like, my stepbrother who was adopted by my dad and was given our last name.
Mm,
Um, and it's a name that he continues to carry. And we are we're an interesting family in that we are all weirdly European, right? Growing up and living in this strange prairie land of in mountains of Wyoming. But we're also like so um, we're very conscious about fitting in, assimilating,
Yeah,
to and adapting to what's around us. Um, and I think that has been the big message of resilience in my family, and something that really enhances and almost backs up the idea of pioneership and
yeah. Mm,
what you have to do in order to survive when you don't have so many resources, when you don't
yeah,
have so many opportunities around you.
right. Wow. Um, well, I am curious with, like, the whole story, but obviously particularly with their murder suicide, like, um, well, two questions, but I'll just ask one at a time. Is what, looking back, what do you feel like did that grief and sorrow and that intensity teach you?
It taught me that you can find healing through art.
Mm.
And there are so
Because
many.
you wove some of this into your
Mhm.
tumbleweed,
um,
as well as additional work after that.
yes,
Yeah.
and uh, it was so important for me to immediately go to the page and start
Hmm.
writing about what I was experiencing and feeling.
Hmm.
What's really strange is that just, I think, 2 days before this event happened, I had a really strange um, morning where I just wasn't feeling myself. And I looked in the mirror and I saw my dad's face
Mm.
and on mine, and where you kind of like recognize your parents a bit sometimes.
Yeah.
And when you look at your reflection, and I wrote something uh, that was like on my computer, dated 2 days before this thing happens, called The Ghost. And it's this like small piece of flash fiction, or not even fiction, but like just flash writing that I did that said The Ghost, written before my father passes. And it,
That was the title.
that was the title.
Wow.
And it was a question of like, does my dad see me in the mirror like I see him? And because we hadn't been speaking for a bit
Mm.
there, and
Mm.
we would go in and out of these uh, relationship kind of snags, as any you know young gay man who has daddy issues encounters and endures.
Yes. Yes.
And yeah, he was never very accepting. We had one conversation about my sexuality, and he was like a big golfer, loved to golf, and I'm not a golfer. And I went and did like 9 holes with him,
Mhm.
and we talked about everything under the sun during that time. And then we parked the golf cart, and before we went back into like the clubhouse, he turns around and he says, "So this gay shit, I'm okay with it. Okay, it's done now." And that was it.
That's the discussion.
Yes. And he turned around and went back upstairs. And it was very indicative of how our relationship evolved and kind of progressed over the years.
Mm.
That my dad was always, he was an only child. He was somebody who was very uh, focused on masculinity and like being the man of the house, and
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
he took that responsibility on, and other people had to respect him for doing so, right? And if the family was not speaking, or like sisters were not communicating with each other, I wasn't communicating with my sister, or had something with my stepmom or whatever,
Hmm.
like he would freak out because he was like, we have to be together, but he wouldn't really put in the work to
Ah.
help with that,
Yeah.
right? It was more dictated father, more of a dictated father role than any other um, semblance of effort.
Yeah.
But
Is there anything? I mean, obviously, it's a two-person street
yeah,
here,
yeah,
but just looking back, as for yourself as well as for the many other people who are certainly in a similar position,
yeah.
uh, is there anything you would have done differently?
Um, I think I, I almost wonder, and this sounds terrible, especially if I think about like healing in the past, but I almost wonder if it would have been better for me if I walked away sooner,
Mm.
and came out to him and let that bomb drop and allow whatever needed to be said,
Uh-huh.
um, because I spent so much of my life trying to seek his approval
Mm.
and
Yeah.
trying to be a son that he could be proud of. Um, and I had other friends of his that would tell me, "Oh, your father's so proud of you," and I'm like, never heard that. You know,
Yeah.
he liked that I was becoming a bit of a local celebrity in a way, and liked that level of recognition,
Hmm.
because it was something he always sought after himself.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, it was really, as I was coming out of this intense tragedy and thinking about what I could have done differently, or what I could have gone back and helped fix or stop or prevent, I really just started thinking about, like, the time is moving forward, and there's really nothing I can do about
Right.
what happened yesterday or 6 months ago or 5 years ago, or this morning. Um, we only are in control of our choices, and how we react to things, how we process, how
Hmm.
we observe the present, and what we do with the time that we have right in front of us.
Mm.
And I think about that when I journal, because I do journal about the past. I'm not like, in automatic writing mode, but I have thought about how to be a writer, to be somebody who journals and kind of writes your story. You do have to sacrifice the present for the past.
Right.
You have to give that past space. And that, I think, is something that I've learned, and from all of this, that there is therapy that has been really helpful for me. There's been medication that has been really helpful for me. I was really resistant for a long time for medication, but in truth, it was my own uh, um, journey of honoring my power as
Mm.
a writer and a storyteller
Hmm.
for myself, and how I can process these really intense, complex emotions, through beautiful language.
Yeah.
And
Would this be, you mentioned a little while back, like you said there were some gifts, I think, or something to that effect that have since come from this terrible event.
yeah, I would say uh, a lot more patience, a
Mm.
lot more. Uh, there's always this drive, and I think a lot of people look at me when I'm like in full on, project mode, where I'm not really hanging out with people. I'm, working 12, 14 hours a day in this space. Um, and they're like, what is he avoiding? What is he hiding? What is he
Yeah,
like,
everyone
you know?
immediately is gonna be like, "Oh, you're just workaholic to not have to deal
Yeah.
with all that stuff that has happened."
In truth, like my workaholic energy uh is so powered by the people around me.
Hmm.
Um,
How so?
I feel a sense of responsibility, especially as somebody who grew up in this town,
Mm.
um, and somebody who has now become a steward of this really incredible space, where I also grew up. To be a bit of a lighthouse, uh, and allow other people and others, artists, whether they're experienced or first timers, um, to feel welcome in this space and feel that they can also process their own pain,
Mm.
their own questions about life and all of its complexities through whatever art form they choose,
Mhm.
whether that's designing lighting for a show, which we've had first timers do, to being a stage manager and being like, I'm an A-type, love organizing. It's really helpful for me to figure out 20 people's schedules. Like, and that's something that they didn't expect, that
Mhm.
they like. And then you have people who are like, I want to be on stage and I want to be the star, and I need to like, that's something that I just need for myself to like get out there and share what I do.
Yeah.
And finding ways to help honor those individuals, I feel like, is a gift that really was given to me from this moment of insular pain,
Mhm.
because in that pain and in that tragedy, because it's a small community and because I put myself out there so much, the amount of support I had was vast.
Mhm.
Everybody reached out. And even strangers, it was difficult at first to have strangers give you a hug on the side of the road, or on this, like the sidewalk and stuff. But like, um, there was a a real sense of care that was being offered to me and my
Mhm.
family members, um, in this small town, and there was a need that I think a lot of people recognized that I didn't know that I recognized, that
Mhm.
I needed for myself, and that was to embrace community and to
Mm.
really
Mhm.
not be so focused on whatever your phone tells you to pay attention to, or like, because it's just a attention hog. It just wants you
Just
so
sucks it.
bad. It wants it so bad. But in truth, I'm like, what can I touch? What can I affect just as
Mhm.
me here?
Mm.
And when I think about that idea of the present and honoring the present, like, what can I do today? That was a gift that I feel like this idea of life being so fragile and being these periods that could be placed down to end a story, um, they can arrive very quickly and unexpectedly in many ways.
Yeah.
So write the best story. And,
Mm,
and hopefully when that period comes, it makes sense.
right.
Yeah.
Hopefully, when the period comes, it makes sense
Yeah.
for yourself and for others. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Speaking of like when you were going through that, and people coming up and giving you hugs on the street.
Hmm.
Um, just curious from your perspective. Often in those situations, people get awkward. They don't know what to say. They don't know what
Right.
to do.
Right.
Is there anything? I guess we could maybe go both sides. Is there anything that was like super like that is exactly not what I need? And is there something that you would have liked that didn't happen or
Um,
that would have helped?
yeah. There was one phrase that uh, I never really thought about until people started saying it to me, and that was, "I'm so sorry for your loss." And I wasn't sure if I was.
Mm,
Um, Not that I was glad that these two individuals were gone out of my life, because I did have love for both of them.
of course.
Um, but there was a lot of difficulty, and I felt like I had been carrying this shackle around my leg, around my ankle, for so long that I learned how to walk with it. And when
Mm,
the shackle was removed, I collapsed and I didn't know how to walk again because I had never walked without it, you know?
right.
And I would never celebrate somebody's death ever, whether they're intense enemy or anything like that. I don't think that death is something you should ever celebrate.
Hmm.
Um, but for me, when I was thinking about how do I process loss, and other people are offering condolences, and I was always grateful. But it was a hard thing that, like, I would never actually like look somebody in the eye when they said like, "I'm so sorry for your loss," and I'm like, "I'm not," like, talk about
Yeah,
awkward.
yeah.
There's
Yeah,
never
that
that,
that would have been a
but
little rough.
totally.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But in my mind, I'm like, this. How do I process this, and how do I really accept this love that people are
Mhm,
offering,
mhm.
um, and understand it without demonizing people who can't defend themselves anymore. You
Right.
know, so it was important for me, and I think hearing that phrase, but also learning how I react to people and how I now um, reach out to people who are experiencing loss themselves.
Mm,
And in many ways, I try to, like, even really close friends, if they've like lost somebody, in some way, I don't mean to be, it's a shoulder that they can't cry on, but I don't necessarily burst my way into their life
mhm,
to help with that, unless they need it, unless they ask, because I did have a lot of people who wanted to help, and I think it made people feel good, based on the situation and how they were related to everybody, and
mhm,
um,
mhm.
uh, it made them feel better to try to help. Um,
Like they're
um,
doing something and
right,
yeah,
but it wasn't necessarily always asked for, right?
right.
And I didn't know how to accept it sometimes. And so, uh, what I think is really beautiful is that when you meet somebody who has experienced loss that they carry with them, um, whether it's like a loved one that they lost, that they are still missing, that they
Mhm,
are, wishing that they're still around. Um, uh, those are people who I totally kind of see on like a soul level,
yeah.
and
Mm,
I just let them know that I'm like, I've also experienced loss. What was important for me was to honor it and to honor the narrative. Know that
mm,
it's a page in the book, and it was a chapter, but you don't have
mhm,
to keep referring back, right? It doesn't have to be this thing that you always, you know, help define what is happening today or your mood today. Um, and and you are allowed to move on in some respect.
mhm.
But still, again, have it as a bit of a scar that you bear,
Yeah.
and a splinter that maybe is just like too deep. It'll be a lot of blood to like get out of your
Yeah.
hand or whatever, right? Um,
And recognizing that scar is
yes,
honoring it.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And I think if that pain is there, like if that splinter is really hurting you, then of
Mhm,
course work needs to be done to
mhm.
remove it,
Yeah.
or to understand what it's
Therapy
doing.
or
Yes,
what have you.
and
Yeah.
we all find our own recipe,
Mhm.
and it's such a strange, natural thing. Um, And one thing when I was listening to the episode with Tiffany,
My
that
wife.
first episode of yours, where she was talking about the beauty in it that you can find.
Mm,
Um,
mhm.
and and I totally hear that. I totally understand what beautiful death can be.
Yeah.
And again, not something you celebrate, but something that you recognize as a way of life and a thing that no matter who you are will affect you
Mhm.
sooner or later.
And it's also that beauty is a reflection of the love,
Very much.
that's underneath it all. Even in, as you said, you had a contentious relationship, but
Mhm.
the love was still there.
Yeah.
So, mm.
Yeah.
Well, I think that it can't end on a better note than that. Love and beauty and death.
Yeah.
Well, I guess since we have you here, what is next for the theater? What's next do you have coming up? What do people need to know about? And where can people find you?
Amazing. Well, you usually find me here in this building.
If you want to say hi in person,
Yeah.
right off downtown square.
Yep. 9 times out of 10, I'm usually doing something in here. But no, we're in our second year basically
Mhm.
of into like our third year now of programming. And what's been really cool is that like the more artists that I'm finding and the more work that we're creating, this nonprofit and this theater are starting to evolve more
Mm,
with
mhm.
other voices. And we're starting to find a bit of like a philosophy here. And the next programs that we have, we're doing an original adaptation of The Velveteen Rabbit.
Oh,
Um,
that sounds fun.
with somebody another individual who grew up here and who has composed an entire score and has devised like this whole incredible art uh, 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 I guess art style
Mm,
for this show in costuming and how it'll be presented. And now we're bringing other artists in to help kind of flesh that out with their own ideas. And so it's going to be a very collaborative piece that opens up in October. That's going to be
oh,
for
wow.
like family friendly
Uh-huh.
around Halloween, a little spooky, but nothing scary. And yeah, and then we're partnering with Jackson Community Theater, which is one of our oldest theater organizations in town to do Arsenic and Old Lace in December.
Oh, wow.
We're doing another burlesque show in February. We're
Always
in,
fun,
yeah,
always a hit.
yes, and so a lot of what we're doing, and I'm mentoring other scripts with teenagers and
Mhm.
adults, and there's a lot of things in development, a lot of ideas that are coming together,
Yeah,
and so to say exactly like where this is all going and what's going to happen, I think there's joy in not really knowing,
yeah,
um, and
and
you know,
collaborating, you were saying earlier off camera,
yeah.
collaborating with others around the state of Wyoming to, like, make that a wider audience, not a wider audience, but a wider voice
Yes,
for the
and
whole
I think,
state,
yeah,
the Tumbleweed.
we want to use this really privileged platform that we have in Jackson, and with all of the money that does come to the community and that is spent here by tourists and brought here by people who are moving to like their dream house and in this incredible space in this part of the world, to really try to unite a lot of us in look at Wyoming as a grander home, not just Jackson versus the rest.
Right.
But think about how we elevate some of these voices that are kind of out in the boonies and don't have great art programs, don't have a theater that we can record a podcast in, right? And invite them to this space and figure out how we support them, and really look at Tumbleweed Creative Arts and this theater as a beacon and like a grander lighthouse for not just local artists, but those around the
Yeah,
region.
that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, and as you mentioned, Tumbleweed is a nonprofit,
Yes.
and one man show going on right here, running the whole thing.
I have
Did
a
a
lot of
little
help. I
big,
have a lot of
got a
help,
lot of help, a lot of volunteers, great volunteers,
but
but always looking for a little bigger budget to
yeah.
hopefully bring on the next person. So, if you are interested in supporting Tumbleweed and what Andrew has going on, you can do that. Well, to those locals, there's the old bill
Old
hope
bills. Yeah.
happening right now that'll help
Mhm.
uh, double, triple, something like that. The
There's a
amount of
match. Yes,
there's a
there's a
match.
match.
That's the word.
Um,
And where else can people donate and support you if
right
they?
on our website, tumbleweedcreativearts.org.
Okay, and anywhere else that they might be able to find you, or is that where they
I
should?
am on Instagram. We have Tumbleweed Creative Arts on Instagram. I'm also at Munz of Steel.
Months of Steel.
Yeah, and yeah, otherwise you'll see me at the post office, milling around Jackson.
Well, Andrew, you've come a long way since playing part of a caterpillar in the fourth grade in Alice in Wonderland. So
It's my first role on the stage.
mine was a donut.
Oh my gosh,
in the
what?
food pyramid, second grade.
Amazing.
Yeah, I was a donut.
Sugary sweet.
So
Well,
hot.
you're at the top then, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was a hot donut at the top.
Heck yeah. Hot donut at the top. That's your next podcast.
Yeah, that's a whole different podcast. All right. Well, thanks again, Andrew. This has been an amazing conversation, and looking forward to watching everything you're up to here in Jackson.
Appreciate it so much. Thank you, Scott.